Hey fellow book lovers, today I am doing a book review on Robert Jackson Bennett's City of Stairs. City of Stairs is a fantasy novel. It takes place in a world which at one point was ruled over by 6 divine beings known as the divinities, essentially creatures with godlike powers. Now the continent where these divinities lived essentially ruled over the entirety of the rest of the world. Eventually, one of the countries that had been in slavery to the continent, the nation of Sepur, a number of warriors rose up from it and were able to come up with a way to not only defeat the divinities, but to even destroy them. First off, what is interesting about this is that the divinities, when they are destroyed, the things that they did are all obliterated. So it kind of explains how the continent goes from being this world power to being basically an impoverished nation. Because what happens is that the divinities who have kept disease away and the divinities who have used their powers to craft these magnificent buildings and give power and keep them clean, once those divinities die, the diseases run rampant. The buildings that they created cease to exist, not only just disappearing, but entire cities disappear completely, including all the people inside. Buildings smashed together, creating these things that shouldn't be stuck together, but they do because everything that existed between them basically vanished and it caused it to contract. In the story, we take place, as I said, 75 years later in the old capital of the continent, the city of Bulakov. Now, Bulakov is under Sepur rule. What sets the story in motion is the murder of a Sepur historian. And the novel follows main character Shara, who is an investigator from the Sepur government who comes in to try and figure out and solve the murder of the historian. There is so much more to this book than that even little simple intro. But going much further would start to spoil some of the really cool elements that exist in this book. The world building elements, the political elements. There's a lot in play, and it creates this incredibly dense and living world without seeming too cumbersome. As an example, the book actually opens on a court case in Bulakov where a merchant is on trial because in his sign he used a symbol for one of the divinities. Now Sepur, as part of their rule, has basically made all things associated with the divinities illegal. So you can't mention them, you can't have any kind of symbols, you can't have any kind of statues. Essentially, they have deleted the existence of the divinities as much as possible. And so it starts off with this court case, and it seems so mundane, but what starts getting revealed through the court case and the interactions between the Sepur magistrates and the defendant and the crowd within the courthouse really does this incredible world building. The novel's told in the third-person active voice. So instead of he said, she did, it is he says, she does. So you get this sense of immediacy. And what's great about this is that it really helps root this current event as being something that is current history. For a novel where so much of the story is rooted in the past and so much of the story concerns itself with history and the interpretation of history and everything else, I thought it was a really amazing decision to tell the current story in this more active tense. Thematically, the story deals with some pretty heavy topics without ever feeling that it's too heavy-handed. One of them, of course, as I said, is the whole idea of the interpretation of history. It's also the idea that history doesn't really die, even though you try to deny it. So often what is said, and it's said numerous times throughout the novel, is how Bulgakov never forgets. That Bulgakov has an endless memory. That no matter how many statues they destroy, no matter how many symbols they delete, no matter how many books they actually rewrite or burn or remove, it doesn't matter because Bulgakov remembers. Even though almost every citizen who lives in the city at this point didn't live there even while the divinities were alive, it doesn't matter. And it's one of the things that I was struck reading the novel was how the author truly makes you feel that he has a very realistic handle on how these citizens of Bulgakov are reacting to their, well, basically the occupation of their nation. That there is still that lingering memory of we were the greatest thing on the world. We held all the power. And yet now they are facing this completely new reality that I found it very interesting that he had a very realistic grasp on how the different segments of that society may splinter in terms of how they viewed it. Will some view it as an opportunity? Will some deny it no matter what happens, whether it turns out to be good or bad? Overall, this whole theme of how do we view history, how do we view religion, how to accept those things of the past, are we right or wrong in our interpretation, and what does that interpretation mean for our modern world, for the world that we're living in? Sometimes the past seems alluring, but it may not be. It may contain truths that we can't handle. And I thought that that was a brilliant message in this book, and like I said, it just plays out through so many different characters and so many different events, and it all sort of comes back to that. The book also contains some great character moments, some great character building. Shara, of course, is this really well fleshed out female character, and she has just enough of this incredible strength, but at the same time we're allowed to see her vulnerabilities, and she has some really humanizing components to her character. In fact, most of the characters in this book get some really great shining moments. They have some really cool motivations. There's some pretty incredible backstories, both tragic and wonderful, mostly tragic. But it really shows you how these characters have been defined by those moments. And all of them, the supporting characters, the starring characters, they really get some moments to shine. If anything, it would probably be the odd villain in this, the antagonist, that don't get quite the fleshing out. Their motivations seem a little bit too just straight ahead. But it still doesn't damage the novel because of all these other things that are in play. And because, like I said, only some of the antagonists come across that way. I could go on at length about other themes and ideas in this novel, but almost all of them would lead to some pretty intense spoilers. So all I'm going to say is that the fantasy novel City of Stairs is a fantastic novel. It has incredible world building. It really immerses you in a world that you could see realistically existing under those conditions. It gives you some wonderful characters to follow and to root for. So I give a huge thumbs up to City of Stairs. I highly recommend it, and I hope you'll check it out and let me know what you thought in the comments down below. If you like this video, click on subscribe so you can check out my other book reviews as well as other videos that I post in the future. Thanks very much for watching, everybody, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.